Okay, guys, today we'll be interviewing a law of attraction expert. How are you doing today, Andrea?
Good. How are you?
Okay, thank you so much for coming on today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and can you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Sure. My name is Andrea Schulman. I live in Florida, United States, and I teach people about the law of attraction. So I work with people one-on-one, and I also run a membership website. So I make lots of videos and lots of content related to practical application of the law of attraction. And before doing that, I used to be a high school psychology teacher. I was introduced to The Secret when I was about the age of 30. And after a few years of practice, decided that I wanted to get into working with the law of attraction. And now I've been doing that since 2014. So
Oh,
that's the short version.
thank you so much for that. Why did you create Rise to Your Vibration Today.com? And what message or what mission or message you're trying to convey?
Well, when I started learning about the law of attraction, initially, I think the reason that I was drawn to it was because I was looking for a career. So it was funny because I was teaching at the time and I had this big desire to figure out what a big career move would be for me because I could tell that teaching was only going to take me so far and I wanted to do something more. And when the law of attraction came to me, it's like a light went off in my mind that of what it was, of how it worked. It was just so very clear to me that the foundation of reality was built on this principle. When that happened, though, I totally forgot about career. It was just, I was so fascinated with the idea of the law of attraction. I got so interested in learning. So I was spending a lot of time online, researching stuff, watching videos, and through that process of a few years, something just suddenly clicked in me and it made sense. Like, oh, you love being online, you're a teacher, you like teaching this stuff. And it all of a sudden made sense that through the internet was the conduit that I wanted to use for this message because I enjoy playing around with technology, being online, all of that. So it just kind of meshed together as a good avenue to create a website because it really kind of hit all the bullet points of things that I like doing, learning, teaching, and tech all in one.
Okay, thank you so much. How did you get into also psychology?
How did I
How
get into, I'm sorry, you cut out.
being a psychologist. How did you get into being a psychologist? Or what was it? What was it? You teach or something? I forgot because you say something about teaching, right? And it's so. Yeah.
Well, I guess I was born into that field. My father is a counseling psychologist. He's retired now, but he was a counseling psychologist and also a professor of psychology. So I was raised in a home where thinking about the mind was very big. And I ended up going to the University of Michigan after high school and wanted to study psychology. So I went down that route, um, did a little bit of research, and thought about taking it as far as becoming an actual mental health professional or becoming a doctor of psychology, but decided that it didn't seem like a good fit for me at that point. However, I did really enjoy the subject. So the career transition that I decided to get into eventually was teaching. So I was a high school psychology teacher. I became certified to teach high school, and that was the field that I taught people in. So, but yeah, I was really raised with a fascination of the mind. That's been a lifelong thing for me since birth.
Well, that's really fascinating. I became fascinated about the mind too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did do you believe that education, you were born and raised in America, or
Yes.
do you believe that our education is broken?
When I was teaching, I really felt so. Yes.
Because the sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I have kind of a different perspective of it now, just in terms of a broader, more law of attraction perspective. I don't think it's necessarily broken, but I think that it could be better. And I think that the flaws in the system are pointing out a desire that a lot of people have, which is to have higher access. And I hate to make it sound, this almost sounds kind of elitist, but I'll go ahead and say it anyway. access to kind of a higher knowledge. And I feel like there's so much emphasis that's placed on little physical details that perhaps are not as relevant as people are actually looking for. So again, that kind of ties into what I do now, is that one of the things that was very kind of clear to me is that if I was going to spend my time teaching people anything, I wanted to teach them something that actually had profound impact on their life, regardless of where they lived or what their career choice was or what their particular circumstances were. Because as a teacher, there's at least my perspective of it was that there was a lot of pressure put on the mundane details, things that were not that important. Testing, that's a big one. Obedience, that's another one. And a sad thing about that I noticed is that when I was teaching, I taught high school kids. So these are kids that are like, they're right in the middle of their rebellious phase. And you could see that for a lot of them, if you said the word school, or if you said the word learning, they would just glaze over. Like, it's almost as if they've been conditioned to think that learning was a bad thing. So that to me points out, at least when I was teaching, that was kind of the big issue that I had with teaching, because I really did love teaching people, but it was the institution that was hard for me to navigate through. For
Yes,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. That's making it clear because it's the whole way that we. What was it? Yes, I'm glad that you're a teacher, right? Because one of my mission is to be able to, like, at least to get people to see about that, because I'm in the special education. I was labeled special ed. That's why I'm so passionate about that, because I think that too. I think it was on Sunday. I talked to one of my old friends from, we met, known each other from since middle school, but I haven't seen her for like 8 years. And what I agreed with was the school didn't teach you about the important subject like taxes or other things that you should be learning, like people, or I don't remember that they teach us about the brain, right? Since you're into psychology and and that really, and then once you go deeper, how the school was built to be able to like obedience. You said obedience like a military. If you go to the history of why school was built, so they have Monday through Friday. That's why people work from Monday through Friday. Like, you can see the military way of thinking. It's because so they can work for the rich. That's terrible. That's terrible.
Well, I think a lot of it, my perspective of it now, if I were to put kind of a law of attraction spin on it, is that back when education was created, there were specific needs that they had, and perhaps people at the time that schools were created were not, they weren't living in the world that we're living in now. They were living in a much more rudimentary world, and it was more widely accepted that you're going to do as you're told. It was much more widely accepted that you don't need higher knowledge. These are the basic things that you need. And the thing about people is that once they get into a habit of doing something, they stay in the habit of doing it. So you get this foundation set up for education that's really built on, hundreds of years ago. And the theme of it has largely stayed the same because it just continues to perpetuate itself over time. But the nice thing is we're at a point now where people openly question it. Because when I was young, nobody really questioned it. There was still very much that you go to school, you get good grades, you're obedient, you go to college, life will be fine. That was the mantra people were still playing. Today, it's a lot different. So that's an indication, I think, that things are changing for the better. But that's part of the change, is that at first people got to get a little bit angry about it and want something more instead of just being complacent with it. Because it's the complacency that keeps the system running the same way year after year after year. And you can tell that that's changing. The schools haven't necessarily caught up to it yet, but the feeling underneath it with students, with parents, you can sense that something has shifted there, which is the good thing out of it, I suppose.
Yeah, but one thing that you were right about the students, though, like all they care about is we was it back in my days when I was in high school. I didn't really care about learning. Matter of fact, I hate homework. I don't want to learn. It's because they force you to learn things that not of your interest. And of course, at the time, I think that young people wanted to hang out or play video games or something like that for like fun. They
Yeah.
don't, and I think that that's why if you hear most adults when you hear something, oh, I don't want to learn anything anymore because they were forced, right? It's terrible. Like learning is a great thing. Like you said, higher knowledge. I think that they also, I don't know if school like dumbed down the knowledge, but I think that there's so much like knowledge that people can like you can learn.
Yeah.
The simple that you don't like. It's really very interesting how they do it.
Well, one thing that's, interesting about that I didn't really understand until I became a teacher in the public school system, but the way that schools are really structured is that they're really governed by the government. They're governed really by the county, at least where I live, they're really governed by the county government. And so what ends up happening is you end up having politicians that are getting brought in, and there are election cycles every few years. So every few years, the people who are really in charge of a lot of the nuts and bolts about education, they're changing. Not all of them, but a lot of those people are changing. And the thing about politicians is that by and large, most of them do not have experience in education, either as a teacher or as an administrator or anything of that. Now, I'm not saying that none of them do, but most of them do not. And so you have kind of this system where the people that are making the decisions aren't necessarily in tune with what goes on within the classroom. And by and large, what they want to do is they want to appease the public. Okay, so they want to make sure that they're creating systems that parents agree with, that voters agree with. And so a lot of times the way that the system is set up is really just set up in this attempt to keep people happy without those people really knowing how the system is run. So it's kind of like saying if you were to go into a restaurant, instead of having a person, a restaurant owner who had worked in restaurants his whole life, just taking him on out and pulling somebody out of their seat who had been in the restaurant before and saying, okay, you go ahead and get in charge of this. They don't really know. And it's not really their fault if you think about it, because they were put in that position that they have to take care of education, but they're running something a lot of times that they really just don't understand. And so there's this funny phenomenon that happens with schools, which is like every few years when there's a new election cycle, there'll be some new changes, they'll come up with some new tests, or they'll come up with some new program that they want you to follow, and none of it makes any sense, and all the teachers freak out because they don't know how to manage it. And then just as soon as they start to understand the system, some new guys come in and they change it all up, and there's this whole new cycle that happens again. And that was something that I saw because I taught for 7 years, and it was like every 2 years when there was an election cycle, there would be something like that where there'd be all these crazy changes that really had nothing to do with true education. And one of the things that would kind of get to me is that one of the things that they seem very intent on doing, and I understand why they were trying to do this, but was trying to come up with a curriculum that was standard for all students. So like if you were teaching history, you were sure to teach all of this stuff on this list, rather than just leaving it all willy-nilly, let the teacher decide what they want to teach. And on some levels, that's a good thing. But on other levels, it's not, because who decides what's on that list? And you could have somebody who has, like for me, when I was teaching psychology, like I said, I was raised in a family. So I had a very broad amount of information of psychology. And it was like you're being put into this little tiny box of this is the only stuff you can teach. So you're right. And people want to learn interesting things. People want to learn what excites them. And people want to teach what excites them too. So if you have a teacher that's restricted, they're not speaking from a place of excitement. The kids aren't having any fun with it. If the kids want to learn something that's a little bit different or not on the curriculum, oh, we don't have time for that because we got to get ready for this test. So the funny thing is that if you wanted to kind of, what I just ended up being was kind of like this rogue teacher, which I would kind of do what I made it look like I was doing what they wanted me to do, but really I was kind of doing this over here. But that's kind of silly that you feel like you have to be secretive and hide in order to have a quality classroom. But anyway, I know I just went off on a tangent there, but you could get me going on this subject for days because I lived it.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Like, I feel like, because I feel like everybody around me when I was like younger, because I used to be a class clown.
Hmm.
I don't like how school is strict the way. Like it's the same routine. All you do is go to school and you try to get good grades. And I was thinking about grades, right? Like I talked to my friend and I was like, people when people say you get A's and all that, they think that you're really smart. They defy you how intelligent you are, while a C or D student, they defy you how stupid you are. But how can you define somebody if you just based on a grade and testing?
Yeah, and it's very true because when I was young, there was not so much standardized testing. This is kind of ties into, it's not grades, but it is kind of similar, is that I have young children now. And so they're going in and getting these scores that tell them it kind of the same thing. This is the really smart score. This is the kind of smart score. This is the not so smart score. And so you have little children like 5, 6, 7 years old, and they kind of get this label put on them when they're very young. Oh, you're not smart. Well, through law of attraction, what you believe in, you start to collect more evidence of that. And I think that's what you see a lot with these kids, is that they just got one teacher somewhere down the road really early that didn't think they were that smart. And so then all of a sudden they start having this experience over and over again. And eventually they just stop caring about school. Because why would you care if it's just telling you that you're no good? You know,
Yeah.
I'm with you. I don't really buy into the whole grading concept. And I have perfectly good reason not to, because I was one of those people who I got great grades, went to college. I did everything in the right sequence. But what I do today I could have done this without any college degree at all. I could have saved a lot of money and just done this. So, all that stuff really doesn't matter. A lot of times it's just labels that we end up putting on people. And for some kids, it comes out to be a very negative label. And then they have to spend a lot of time trying to shake that belief system that they're not good enough intellectually.
Yeah, I do agree. What you say about the law of attraction, or the whatever we believe it become our reality, right? Is the confirmation bias. I think you heard of this before.
Mm-hmm.
Self-fulfilling prophecy had to do with it too. I believe that whatever we believe to be really strongly, it comes true. So how do you experience the law of attraction? I would like to understand that one. Because go ahead.
How do I experience it?
Yeah, law of attraction wise, like, because I know that you're into the law of attraction, you're teaching it too.
Yeah.
For those who want to, because I see over the years people have been struggling with the law of attraction. So how would you help them if they keep struggling but they know it? Like, because there are some people that know it but they can't get it right or something. So how can you help them with that one?
Well, I think it's important to understand that a lot of times the things that people think they want
Mhm.
are more based on fears than enjoyment. So if we were talking about school, just to use it for an example, let's say that we have a student who wants to get an A, but not because he likes the class, not because he enjoys learning, not because it's fun for him, but more because he is worried about what it means about him, or he's trying to appease his parents. So if somebody's going into a dream, something that they want for themselves, but the reason why they want it is because they're running away from a fear, or they're trying to do something to build themselves up so they can buy into a limitation, then what will continue to be re-experienced by that person is they won't get it, or they'll get it in a way that's very unfulfilling, so that they continue to feel bad about themselves, because at the root of the desire is, I don't feel good enough. So the only thing that they can get from it is a reflection that says, I'm not good enough. So that's one of the things, like when I work with people one-on-one, a lot of times if they have specific desires that aren't working, that's kind of one of the things that we would look at is Is there kind of a fear underneath this? Is this a true interest? Because just like we were talking about with education, like learning is fun, creation is fun, all of this stuff is fun. If it's not fun, it means you're doing it in a way that's not connected to your higher truth. You're disconnected in some way. You're chasing after something that isn't really going to make you feel good. And the funny thing is, when it comes to the law of attraction, the only reason why people want things, they want money or a relationship or good grades or a car, the only reason that they want it is because they want to experience joy. And so if joy is not at the root of the desire, it isn't going to work. So that's kind of the thing to understand, is that if you're reaching, a lot of times when people struggle with the law of attraction, it's just because what they're reaching for is something that points to something bad that they believe about themselves. It isn't true. And they have to let go of that first in order to experience the having of that thing. But the funny thing is, once they let go of that negative belief, a lot of times they don't even care if that thing shows up anymore, because they don't need the confirmation that they're a good person or whatever the case may be. So that's one of the things, that people are motivated really strongly in two ways. They either chase after things that they're really excited about. Those are the things that are fulfilling with the law of attraction, because you can just focus positively and let those things come in. Or they're focused on things that they're running away from. Fear, pain, sorrow. But the problem is, if you're trying to run away from something, that's what you're focused on. You're focused on the pain. You're focused on the sorrow. So you continue to bring in things that mirror that back to you. Now, for me, you asked me about my experience of it. I just feel like I've kind of gotten to a point in life where I cannot see it not working anymore. I see it all the time. And I see it really on just a moment-to-moment basis based on how I feel. So if I'm feeling really good, things just start piping into my reality that reflect it. The sun starts shining a little bit brighter. Good news starts coming. I get new business or whatever. Good stuff just starts flowing my way. And when I start feeling crummy, or if I start getting irritable, it's like things just start showing up to reflect back that irritation. It's kind of like if you're in a traffic jam and you start getting frustrated with the traffic jam, and then all of a sudden it gets longer and there's more problems and the car slows down and the air conditioning isn't working, and you can just sense that it's getting worse and worse and worse. I just can't really unsee it at this point. I see it so obviously that wherever I'm tuned, that's what I'm getting. So as far as the experience, it's all the time. I've had lots of interesting, fun things that have shown up for me. I can tell you some stories about that, but really what shows me that it works is that I literally cannot escape it. So it's hard for me not to believe in it, because I don't see any other proof of anything else, that circumstances are just random or anything like that. I don't believe that anymore. Not at all.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for that. Like, I was thinking about how can you merge your experience of teaching education with the law of attraction, because our world, or quote unquote the masses, don't believe in this stuff. Like, and so how do you merge it together for you? Because
For me?
yeah, for you, yeah. Because I interview a lady who is almost like you. She's what was it, psychologist, but she do research. I can't remember the whole detail, but she's also in the spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you merge it together?
That's a really good question, because when I first started learning about this, I was still a teacher. So I wanted to be able to teach this to students, and I kind of did, but in a very covert, not direct way. But something that I noticed, and you can tell, like, just from this interview, like when you got me talking about schools, I could be like, well, this is the problem, and this is the problem, and this is the problem, and this is the problem, because I was in the school system without knowing the law of attraction for about 4 years. So I was able to get really tuned into what all the problems were. So for me, on my particular journey, I think it was important that I got out of education for a while, just so that I could stop seeing the things that I perceived as problems. Because if I'm focused on the problems in the education system, they're going to continue to stay that way. You have to see it through a new filter of, this can work out, this is going well, people are receptive to this. So for me, personally, I think coming out of the school system was important, because it allowed me to stop focusing on those particular issues more and more. I would at some point like to be a part of bringing it back in. Absolutely. But just like you mentioned a few seconds ago, you said something that hits me because I kind of buy into it too still, even though I'd rather not. And the idea is that not a lot of people understand this stuff, or a lot of people are not receptive to this. That's the piece that we have to change, is to start to see that people are receptive to this. People are interested in this. More and more people are listening to this, entertaining it, willing to listen to it, wanting to learn about it. But you know, the thing is that in order to do that, you have to demonstrate that in your own life. So for me, when I first started learning about the law of attraction, I kept it very quiet because that was my perception, was that most people didn't want to know, or it was offensive, or they thought it was crazy, or they thought I was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs because I was talking about this stuff. So as time has gone on, reaching out more about it, being more public about it, creating a website about it, even like on my personal social media pages, talking about it, you know, just making it more of a standard of normalcy has helped me see that this can be something that everyone's interested in and everyone gets. But you're right, like as long as we have this perception that a lot of people don't get it, or that they think that it's crazy, we're not going to get it into the schools. Really has to be a system where we're looking around and everyone's like, yeah, this stuff actually does work. We should be teaching children this. We really should be teaching children this. This would be good for our kids to be learning about. So I think we're in the process of evolving to that, because you're seeing more and more people talk about the power of positive thinking, talking about psychological phenomenon, talking about how the brain works. Like this is becoming more and more commonplace in society. But I think how we do that is just making it normal in our own lives, normal to talk about, and assuming that people will want to hear it rather than, oh, this person can't handle this truth. Because that I think keeps us off in the ethers where the bulk of the population isn't going to take us seriously.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah. Once when I was in 2013, I was awakened to this power within us. What was it? Two of the books that I have read was the Alan Watts, the Taboo Against a book that whatever Taboo Against Us, and then the Power of the Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. Right, it's a powerful book, and like you could see that coincidence would just happen. Like if I can change my mood, because of the therapist, she showed me about self-fulfilling prophecy. If you can change the mood, you can change your circumstances to attract to you. It's really powerful. It was weird, but in a cool way. And I watched The Secret, which I read it a couple. I mean, watch it a couple of times. I tried it, but I think that because I become frustrated, like you know how like we want it like instant, like to attract. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's what happened, but there's time where things don't happen the way you want to, and then yeah. How's your experience when you came to experience The Secret, and can you explain that? I want to hear that one.
How I came to experience when I found the secret.
Yeah, The Secret. Yeah.
Yeah, so it does tie into kind of the story of career and education. So, like I said, I was a high school teacher at the time, and we were coming up on winter break. So we were going to have a couple weeks off in the middle of the winter for people to celebrate Christmas and the holidays. And for whatever reason, I had been feeling kind of unfulfilled in my job, and I had been feeling like this is it. This is it. This is as good as it's going to get, right? So coming up on that break, I had this sudden flash of insight that, you know what I'm going to do this winter break? I'm going to figure out I feel like I should be doing more with a career. Like, what's a big career I would be great at? I'm going to figure it out. And for whatever reason, in that moment, I believed that I was going to figure that out. I really did. I really did. I don't know why I thought I'd figure something out like that in a flash, but I did. So we went off on winter break, and the first week was really just getting ready for the holidays and wrapping presents and making cookies. Didn't really do anything to figure out this big dream career. And I realized the week after that I had spent absolutely no time on this big discovery I was supposed to be making. So I sat down at my kitchen table, like with a pen and paper, and I was going to figure it out. I'm going to figure this out. Let me write a list or something like that. And I sat down at the table and nothing was coming to me. Sat there for a couple minutes. I'm like, you know what? Whatever. This isn't working right now. Let me just go sit down. I'm going to go watch some Netflix. So I sat down on the couch and I turned on Netflix. I went right to the documentary section because those are the things I like to watch on Netflix. And right on that front page was an introduction to The Secret. And the explanation of it was like perfect. It was like, you know, figure out your dream career, figure out your da-da-da. I'm like, well, that was what I was planning on doing over there a few minutes ago. So maybe I should watch this. And it was very strange because I turned it on. And I know that documentary doesn't speak to everybody. So some people really don't like The Secret. But for me, I sat down and, you know, it just hooked me right away. I was like, oh my goodness, I get it. Like I just got it. And it was just amazing to me that all of a sudden everything made sense, because I always used to have this, the big thing for me was that I always used to have this phenomenon where I would have like the best day or the worst day. And I could not for the life of me figure out why. I would drive to work every morning terrified. Like, is it going to be a bad day? Because if you teach high school, a bad day can be vicious. So I would be terrified that it was going to be a bad day. And then watching that, one of the first sequences that they show in there, like people having a bad day and getting worse and worse and worse. I'm like, oh my goodness, like, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden I could see all this application of how it was applying to my life and how the problems that I had been my focus. And for me, it was a lot of times with the law of attraction, people don't like the idea of responsibility. Like, I'm the one creating this. For me, that never really even entered my mind. It was like a relief to realize that I had created it, because I had felt like I was just getting beaten up by life a lot of the times. It was nice to know that, okay, well, I'm the one that's doing this, so I can start to manipulate what's going on. And I've had such a long experience learning about psychology that I think that also helps supplement the information for me really well. So, but like I said, I did that. I sat down to try and figure out a career, but after learning that, it's like I totally forgot that I even wanted a career. It was like, oh my goodness, we got to go to work, because I had a whole bunch of issues that were going on at the time. I had an eating disorder. I was a drug addict. I had all kinds of other things that were beneath the surface that needed to be fixed. And so kind of one by one started to learn how to program myself differently. So for me, I know sometimes people get frustrated because maybe they want to attract the lottery and it doesn't come or something like that. But, you know, like if you can get over a drug addiction, or if you can get out of a really toxic situation, or if you can heal like pain, like for me, I felt like I came from a very dark place. And so because so many very negative things were transformed into very positive things, it doesn't matter. A lot of the dreams that haven't come, I realize, are not that important, or that they are tied to some kind of limitation, because the things that were really important to me and that were really tied to my joy, not my fear, but my joy, those have all been coming true, coming true, coming true. So that's why I like teaching it. And that's why I try to stay to that script of, you know, stick to your joy and be mindful of when you're reaching for something that touches on your fear, because those are the dreams that will keep you chasing your tail, you know, because you're trying to prove something, because you don't believe you're good enough, or this or that. Those are the dreams that are going to make you feel like garbage. If you can stick to the script of what's healthy for me, what's good for me, what's going to make me feel good about my life, what's going to make me feel fulfilled, you'll start hitting those, and they'll carry you in a direction where life becomes a lot easier, more fun, and enjoyable. So I know I went off on a tangent there, but for me, that's where I got it from. And really, that was the experience I had, was like, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh my goodness, I finally get it. I've been studying psychology my entire life, and I finally get it. So I was on board from day one.
Thank you so much for telling the story. It was really fascinating. How because I'm fascinated by psychology, actually.
Mm-hmm.
How do you explain the connection with The Secret or the law of attraction? Like, what is it, psychology, and what does it do? Because I actually want to know more. I don't even know like the simple like stuff.
Yeah. Well, psychology is really just the study of behavior and the brain. And there's a lot of different types of psychology that hit a lot of different things. And so there's different fields that focus on different aspects of why people behave the way they do, why people think the way that they do. So as a discipline, and I guess you could say this for a lot of disciplines, but there's a lot of different ways that it's approached. Okay. Um, but I feel like with psychology, it's just kind of the scientific way of trying to explain the law of attraction, as also is quantum physics. I think that's a better explanation mathematically of the law of attraction. But if you look at something like confirmation bias, like you mentioned, or self-fulfilling prophecies or placebo effects, there are all these phenomenons that psychologists have noticed over time that are very indicative of the law of attraction. Or even if you were to look at like behaviorism, and behaviorists study how people become conditioned in their behavior, how they become habituated to act certain ways, or how you can get people to act certain ways. And they're all about focus. Like if you can get somebody focused on something and keep their focus there, that behavior will start to be trained into them. Some psychologists study the brain and how neurons are connected, and they've noticed that the more somebody learns something, the more their brain becomes hardwired to think that same thought over and over and over again. Well, that's the law of attraction. The more you think something, the more it comes to you. So psychology, I really feel, and some other disciplines of just biology and science have stumbled onto things that are like physical symptoms of the law of attraction. So for me, having learned all of that stuff, and then, oh, okay, that's why that's law of attraction is why that's happening, because the body is just a reflection of that internal processing. But yeah, I mean, there were so many, that was one of the cool things about teaching psychology, is there were all these neat little phenomenons, and I like teaching those to the kids about the crazy stuff that people do, and you can see how their focus created this or that. And then all of a sudden understanding that, oh, that's just the mechanism of reality. It's not just a weird phenomenon. That's the way all of this stuff works. For me, it just really tied it all together.
That is so beautiful. Like I was thinking about how what was it? Are you into what's his name? He written the book. I can't, Joe Dispenza.
Yeah.
I think you know. I think you know because you talk about it. I was like, oh, she know about. Okay.
Oh yeah. Joe Dispenza does a lot with the brain and the chemicals, like peptides and that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's kind of the cool thing too, is that there's so much stuff out there for different people. It's like some people, they don't like hearing it in terms of law of attraction, but they love learning about it in terms of science. You know, some people prefer like math, so quantum physics approach might be better. Some people prefer biology, so a Joe Dispenza approach might be better. But there's so much evidence of it, and there's different ways of explaining it that all come to the same conclusion. You know, but yeah, I love his stuff. His stuff is great. He does a really great job explaining biology and the connection. Absolutely.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. I would because basically the reason why I'm doing all these interviews,
Mm-hmm.
I do interviews with not only law of attraction expert, but martial artists. I'm trying to piece together that we're all one family because I do what was it? Law of attraction, martial artists, languages, and artists. They're all like connecting because language. I'm trying to connect with that one. They're all one. But also, I think that because I want to, my mission is to change the little bit, to impact the law of attraction thinking a little bit. Because in The Secret, they didn't teach, from my understanding, my evolved evolution, that they didn't teach about coming place. Because people always attract things, right? That's how I noticed where people come to law of attraction, they want, the lottery ticket. But because I look up to Bob Proctor a lot, so I look up to him. But they don't teach about the people skill. That's the one thing that I want to impact, or the marketing or selling, because people feel icky about that. What do you think about that?
About specifically which one?
The skill, people skill, because the secret didn't put. I mean, it's great to that all began about the law of attraction, but we don't emphasize on people skill or
Like
communication.
relationships and communicating with other people. Yeah, that's a good point, because that isn't something that is touched on much in The Secret, and yet that's something that's such a big thing that can interfere with somebody's general mental state, is how do they interact with people? Because unless you're not interacting with anybody, you're banging up against other people, and how that interaction goes has a very big bearing on how you feel, what you think, and what you start projecting out there and what you start getting back. Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, that's been one of the big things for me. That's been another big aha, was been learning how to deal with people differently and understanding that people were giving me what I was putting off, and understanding that in order for somebody to treat me differently, I had to change how I looked at that person, because the way I used to think about it was, this person is just treating me like garbage. This is a bad person. They're out to get me. And that way of thinking would keep people in my reality who made me feel victimized. And learning how to work with that, really, that's a big one. That's a big one. When you can go from like being scared of people, or feeling threatened by people, or feeling on guard with people, and getting to a place where, you know, you feel like you can connect with just about anybody. When you talk about we're all one, that's awesome. That's the vibe, is like getting into that understanding that we're all connected and that we all kind of move together. But yeah, that's the big thing, is just learning how to look at people different, looking at them as if they are one, as if they are you. But that's hard for a lot of people, because, you know, a lot of people, they've got pain in their past, or they have had long-standing relationships that were toxic in nature. And it's become so ingrained that this is a negative relationship, or this is a negative person. It can be very hard to change how you look at somebody when you've come to view them in a certain way for so very long, because the longer you stick with a pattern of thinking, the harder it is going to be for you to shift, especially if you're not aware of it. It's probably just going to stay on autopilot, you know? So when I work with people on that kind of stuff, one of the things that I found is useful is to focus on relationships with people that are not very important to you. Because something that's helpful is understanding that like, let's say that you had a really toxic relationship with your mom, right? And so since you were like a little child, you've had bad communication with your mom. Well, changing how you view your mom is probably going to be hard, because she said a lot of terrible things at this point. So it's hard to unsee all of that at this point. But it's not as hard to shift how you view somebody you don't really know, because somebody that you don't know is a blank slate. So something that can be really helpful for people when it comes to like learning communication and those kind of skills is to practice on people you don't know. So practice on like cashiers, practice on people that you're sharing an elevator with, practice with random people in line. And all you have to really do, I've found for me was helpful, was to look for two things. One is, what do I like about this person? And the other thing is, what do I have in common with this person? And you don't have to say anything. But when you're around somebody that you don't know, just kind of think about them. What do I like about you? Well, I like this guy's hair. She's got cool shoes. He's got a nice smile. You know, oh, she's being nice to her daughter. I like that. Just focus on a couple of things like that. And then also focus on what you have in common. We're both women. We're both men. We're both at the grocery store. We're both driving cars. But what that gets you to do is to focus in two areas. One is, I like you. And if you're projecting I like you at somebody, they'll project it back. The other one is, I'm in this together with you. We're connected. There's something that connects us. And that brings you more into the knowledge that you're in communion with that person. And just doing those two things with random people that I didn't know, I started to notice that random people started to treat me differently. They'd hold doors open for me. They'd say nice things. They'd strike up friendly conversations with me. I'd be at a restaurant, have a nice little conversation with the lady, and she'd hand me a coupon for like 25% off my meal. Little things like that. And once you start seeing that evidence that as long as I'm shining at you, I like you, I have something in common with you, you're nice to me, the more you see that, the more comfortable you are doing that with people that you have longer standing relationships with. And you just kind of shift the tide. Whereas instead of feeling like you're defensive against people, or that you have to protect yourself against other people, oh, all I have to do is reach out to you psychologically, showing you that I like you, showing you that I feel connected to you. And for me, that made a huge difference. Huge difference. Because now I've got good relationships with everybody that I interact with. I don't have any hostilities anymore. But I used to have a lot of them. A lot of them.
It seems like you really do understand people, right? Because I do exactly the same thing as you. Well, whether if I wanted to or not, it depends on my if I wanted to, right? Um, People feel like they need to be important, right?
Mhm.
And when you it doesn't because I'm actually naturally introverted, right? I don't like to like because I have to learn to get out of my comfort zone to actually communicate or to talk to people. Now it's just natural to me. I can just come up, go up to anyone,
Yeah,
just talk. Yeah, but the thing is, the cool thing is that we didn't learn. I wish they did put the book in our hand.
yeah.
It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People in school. I think that would be the greatest.
That's one I still haven't read.
Really?
Yeah,
Well,
that's on my list.
it's the same thing that okay. For example, everybody say I make them feel comfortable doing interviews. Do
Hmm.
you feel comfortable
Yeah.
when? Yeah. So that's how I use the How to Win Friends, Influence People in this interviews and other interviews because it's people. You have to make them feel comfortable,
Mm.
and that's how I learned over like talking to people.
Yeah.
So,
Well, good. So
yeah.
that you've seen it in action. I'm introverted. I'm introverted too. And yeah, I think that it used to work against me because I just started to assume that that was what was preventing me from communicating with people. But
Yeah, I,
you can be introverted as anything else and still get along with anybody you interact with. Those two things are not, it doesn't mean anything if you're introverted. All introverted means is you like some private time. That's all. I like to rest by myself once in a while. It doesn't mean that you don't like people or that you can't talk to them or anything like that.
that's true. That's very true. Thank you so much. This is a lovely conversation that we have.
Hmm.
Um, uh, what let me see. What does success look like to you?
Mm. Success looks like to me, that's a good question. It looks probably a little bit different than some people. But my opinion is waking up in the morning and being excited for my day. And for me, it means feeling like I can do what I want to do when I want to do it and having the freedom to do that. And yeah, letting that be the deciding factor in my life is what do I feel like doing right now as much as I possibly can. That
Wow,
is success.
that is beautiful. Wow, so many of the people I interviewed there they care deeply for their families deeply.
What's that?
That what?
What
What
did
did you
you
say?
say? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Well, it's okay. I said the people that interviewed they care about deeply for their family, but for you, it's about waking up in the morning and do what you want to do, when you want to do it, and how
Yeah.
you want.
Well, it's true is that, taking care of your family, and I like that too. But one thing that I've noticed is that if I'm happy, I'm the biggest benefit to everybody in my family. So I can be as selfish as I want in the happiness department. And I've noticed that the more selfish I am in the happiness department, the better my family is doing. So I don't feel the need to sacrifice my happiness for my family because I realize that when I do that, I tend to go more in a negative route. And then I become resentful that I've given up this or given up that. So yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily goes against taking care of your family. I think if you love your family and you want the best for your family, if you follow your highest path, that will all be taken care of because you're feeling good and only good things can happen to the people around you that are very important.
You always mention about not higher knowledge, higher. It's like for you, what is your higher path or higher self or?
Well, I guess that's a good question. I kind of look at it in the way that you described it, this idea that we're all one. I kind of believe that there's kind of this one infinite mind and that we are all of that one mind. And so there are higher levels of knowledge that you can tap into. And there are paths for your life that can go an infinite number of ways. Now, this is a kind of a crazy conversation, but I believe in the concept of infinites. I believe that all things are possible. I believe that there are infinite lifetimes. I believe that there are infinite yous and infinite me's that are living on infinite trajectories. I, as a consciousness, the way I look at it, I get to decide where I place my consciousness. I can align myself with a higher truth that puts me on a path that's joyous and exciting by listening to it and letting it steer me where it wants to take me. And I do that by following what feels good for me, what feels healthy for me, what feels like it's taking me in an exciting direction. Or I can choose to focus my consciousness on things that do not feel that way, that are out of alignment with that higher sense of higher path or higher mind. I hope that makes sense. But I believe
Yeah,
that, you know, we have a lot of free will to do whatever we want to do. I think we can go wherever we want to go. I don't think that there's a lack of free will, but I think that if you really want to get to a path that's truly successful in your own mind, happy, fulfilling, you have to kind of surrender the idea that you can turn away from the guidance that's coming to you. Because the guidance that's coming to you is that oneness, that mind that knows all and that can steer you around every mountain. I don't know if I gave you enough on that, but that's kind of the belief that I have in a nutshell about, you know, a higher power or a higher path that I could have for myself. I kind of see it as surrendering my ideas of what it should be and just allowing myself to move in the direction of what feels right for me now, what feels good, what feels right now, rather than let me keep doing this thing that isn't really working because I'm trying to prove something or because everybody else is doing it or because someone told me to do it a long time ago, but being willing to adjust my path based on what's calling me in the moment. And the experience that I have is that there, for me, it's as if there is kind of this knowledge that comes in. It's not, I guess it is mine, but it's not mine. It's more like I get insight or intuition or flashes on where to move. The more I just listen to that, the better things seem to go for me. So that's been my experience.
you said how do you develop your intuition? That's because it's very fascinating to me about the intuition thing, right? I noticed that I every time because I interview many people from many genders,
Mhm.
but I noticed that women are more strongly connected with their intuition, right? Because during 2013, I never knew it. I always had intuition, but I wasn't aware that I have it, right? The intuition that the voice that because intuition and law of attraction is very going hand in hand, right? If you listen to it, you follow it, it attract you to the things that bring you the thing that you need or want, whatever. For you, how you develop or become aware of your intuition?
I think, well, I mean, it's interesting if if women have it more. I don't know. I'm not a man, so I only have my own experience. I feel like for me, I've had throughout the course of my life a number of really big aha moments, and they all felt like they just kind of struck me. And I didn't really give them a lot of credence until I started having kind of this more spiritual journey. But through the law of attraction, whatever you focus on expands. So, one of the things that I try to do is I acknowledge it when it comes. I like, oh, that was intuition, rather than just brushing it off, because the more you acknowledge it, the more receptive you are to it. Another thing that I do is, and I know this is kind of silly, but I feel like I will talk to it, or like I will talk to whatever is giving me that information. You know, if I've got a question or if it throws me a great idea, sometimes I get like really great ideas that just kind of come and hit me. I'm like, oh, thank you. But I'll talk to it as if it's a person. I know it's kind of silly, but the way I look at it is the more I focus on the idea that I'm an intuitive person, the more I engage with it, the more of it comes. And that's really been my experience is that when I first started doing what I do, I was just going to put a website up. That was it. And my brother, he's like, you know, you really need to run a blog. And I'd never run a blog before. I never did anything like that. He's like, no, you really need to run a blog. So I'm like, okay. So I started writing a blog every day. And at first I started getting worried, like, am I going to run out of information? Am I going to run out of ideas? Then I realized the more I focused on getting the ideas, the more came. The more information I asked for, the more I got. And so I realized that the more I just focus on getting it, the more it comes. I think that's really what it all boils down to is, am I noticing that it's coming? And am I acknowledging it? Because if you can do that, you'll just drum up more and more and more of it. Because I've always had these kind of hits, but now I get them a lot. And I think it's just because developed more of a relationship with that aspect of my life over time.
It's very interesting that you say you talk to
Yeah.
the, because I do that the same thing too.
Mm-hmm.
Where it talked back to me. I know it. I remember one of my therapists said I'm into my head too much, but that's not the case. Um, there was one incident where if I listen, like coincidence what happened. So I don't think that would be the case. So that's very interesting. Do you read Think and Grow Rich? Or
I read that. I have read that. Napoleon Hill?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Because I was like, oh, she probably read that too.
Probably got it sitting right over here somewhere. I kind of want to just pull it out and show you if I can see it.
Yeah,
I'm going. Hold on. Oh, that's disappointing. I thought I could have sworn I was going to be able to pull it out and show it to you real fast. It's on a different shelf.
do I have it? No, I'll put it over there somewhere. All right. So for you, how did you do you have any fear, and how did you overcome
I have less and less and less of it over time. I would be lying if I said I did not have fears, but there's less and less and less of them over time. And now, like in the past, I didn't know that it was just constant. Like I said, I used to have an addiction, eating disorder. So obviously there was a lot of fear in my life at that time. But one thing that I've learned is that really just the only thing that perpetuates the fear is focusing on the fear. So now if I have a fearful moment, like if something happens and all of a sudden it's like, you can feel that kind of go in. As soon as I'm aware of that, what I do is I just take a really slow, deep breath in, hold it for a few counts, release it. And then I'll ask myself, what could I do right now that could bring me some relief or that would feel better than this? Like I won't sit there and think about it, talk about it. I would try to calm my breathing and then immediately segue into something else to distract me. Because the belief structure that I had before the law of attraction is I got to figure out what this fear is all about. I got to figure out what this problem is all about. But a lot of times, a lot of the things that we're fearful of, they're really not any big, there's no real big meaning. The only reason that they're there is because we continue to focus on them. So the less airtime you give them, the less relevant they become. So yeah, it's a process of constantly being very present and being very aware of how you feel in the present moment. And when you start to feel fearful, realize that the only thing that's creating that fear is right now I'm focused on something in a negative way. So if I can find a way to take my focus off of this and go somewhere else, I'll start feeling better and it will suddenly not seem like a big deal anymore. It's really all about playing with your energy at the end of the day, like getting your energy in a place that's clear and clean and positive. Then there's nothing to fear in that paradigm. If you're walking into things that are fearful, all it means is that you've wandered into an energy state that's making you a magnet for fearful thoughts. That's it. So yeah, the less airtime I've been given that stuff, the less and less and less and less and less of it is present in my life. There's still a few that pop up here and there, but like I said, I just distract myself. They're still in the process of cycling out. That's all.
That's very powerful. I saw you have an image of doing like this with your leg. Are you meditate, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How often do you meditate?
I don't meditate now as much as I used to. When I first got started with the law of attraction, I don't really understand. It's funny because there's all these things that I just started learning and doing all at once. And it's like it just hit me like a ton of bricks. But pretty much as soon as I started learning about the law of attraction, I started meditating a lot. And I would say probably the first couple years, I was meditating at least an hour a day, which is a lot. It's a lot. But I think at the time it was needed. Now I meditate less and not necessarily every day, although I will say that pretty much every day I will lay down and kind of zone out. And I don't know if it's like a nap or what, but it only lasts like 20 or 30 minutes. And it's kind of like I get into that low level of kind of a sleep and then I'll wake up out of it. So I don't know if that counts as meditation, but I still do that pretty much every day. But yeah, I mean, if I ever feel stressed or overwhelmed, or if I have a very busy day. I don't have a lot of these crazy days anymore, but if I had like a lot going on in a day, I would make sure to sit down and like get it centered first. But yeah, I try to be very mindful about where I'm at. And if I can tell that I'm getting frenzied or whatever, then yeah, I will sit down and do it. But as a regular practice now, I'm not as committed to it. But then again, like I said, I think I'm still doing it because I already took one of these power naps a couple hours ago, so pretty much every day I'm doing something of that nature.
Yeah, I used to do that a lot when we were, or at least I had the same experience as you, where I start learning about the law of attraction and I start meditating outside and stuff like that. But I don't do as much as neither or whatever we're supposed to do it. I don't know. But there's you talk about in this interview. You talk about your career. You didn't uh, you didn't things didn't go like well with you because there's a lot of career with people that they were supposed to do this, but now because I had one comment of this guy, he was talking about 45, right? He was 45 and he was like he's followed this certain path
Yeah.
because he followed the system because we talk about the system
Right.
and he it's like they people give up, they stop believing that good things can happen, but they can. But in your time, like when you feel like that, what did you like? What did you? How do you feel? Because I had that moment before that, like you had, where that is this it? Like, because I was working and it was like, is it? Like, I'm gonna be working every day, just that's it. Like, how did you see it? Like, what did you feel? Because so many people feel like that.
Back then, yeah, I mean, it was really just this feeling like I had settled, feeling like I had so much more that I could be doing or contributing or an impact that I could be having. And that's not to say that I didn't. I mean, the thing is, I look back now and I think it doesn't matter where you are making a big impact and you are doing tremendous things. But for me at the time, it felt like there was something so much bigger that I had just given up on. That was kind of the feeling. But the thing was, I didn't know what it was. That's kind of that was the feeling I had, that there was something that was bigger that was calling me. I didn't know what it was, but it felt like I'd given up on it and I never even knew what it was. That was the feeling of it.
Mm.
But yeah, I think, I really do, like I said, I believe in the concept of infinites now. So I really do believe that we're infinite in nature. So now the way I kind of look at things is you have an eternity to do everything. So I don't look at things so much as I'm giving up on this or I'm giving up on that, but rather I try to look at things as I have an eternity to do anything. So what would I like to do with this moment of eternity? And the more I can look at things like that, the more I really just start doing what really rings my bells in each moment. That's really been helpful to me because sometimes what could have happened for me, this could have happened where I could have had this idea or, I want to have this particular career. And I could have jumped on a track and gotten into another situation that felt like I was settling. And I think sometimes people, they get the idea that they want to jump into a new career or they want to jump into some new success. But what they're thinking about or what they have in their mind is really just another cage. It's like, it's just another version of the same thing that they're doing. Like I could have been a teacher and then I could have jumped into being an entrepreneur, but I could have just had the same hamster on a wheel approach. Check your email at this time every day, do this, this, and this, and keep it in a box. Like I could have done, you know what I mean? So for me, the idea that it has to look a certain way or it has to be a certain way, the less I've held on to that, the more fun I've gotten to have.
Mm. It seems
So
like you love joy, like fun for you, like.
yeah.
But where does it come from? Like, where the infinite like come from? Because I was thinking about that. Because I was like, that's a very interesting concept. Like, can you explain for that?
Where does in infinites?
Yeah, for you, like for you, because I know that, because I interview like his name is Dennis William Hawk. He because it was the Ouroboros. You're right. We're infinite. Like that's the same thing as the energy, right? Whatever we put out come back. It's the Ouroboros, meaning that it's like the yin and the yang. I forgot. It was uh as above, so below. I can't remember what the Ouroboros, but where's the for you the concept of infinite come from? How did you figure that out?
Well, like I said, like like I said before with like intuition, I used to get these aha moments. Like I've always had them. But one of the ones that really stands out to me, and it always kind of happens at a time where I decide I'm going to know something, and the information just comes to me. So I was having this conversation. I was in college at the time, and I was staying up late. My roommate and I were having one of these college philosophical discussions of what does it all mean, like one of those kind of conversations. And we were talking about God and what's really going on. And all of a sudden in my mind, I told myself, I said, you know what? You should be able to understand what all this means. You know what? And for whatever reason in that moment, I believed that I should understand what it meant. Like I just told myself, you've been to school for a long time, you're smart, you should be able to figure this out. How arrogant. But that was the thought that went through my mind. And in a flash, I got this information. It was basically like a question that was asked back to me. And it said, okay, since you're so smart, you've been to school a long time. Of all of the subjects that you've learned, which one is always consistent across every culture, across every time period? Oh, and it came to me immediately like math. Math is always consistent. And it came back and said, okay, well, can you apply math to this question? And then all of a sudden, the concept of infinity kind of rang out to me. Like, oh, anything is possible. Anything is possible. And where we are right now is just one little intersection of the infinite, but it's all possible. And that was one little fragment of the key of infinite that hit me. And I want to say probably like 18 or 19 years old when that came. But when that hit me, I started to see this construct of God that I had learned so much growing up more as a mathematical concept than as some kind of man sitting on a cloud telling me what to do. Okay. So that kind of skewed me in that direction of infinite. And since then, I've gotten more information, more ideas about it. Learning about quantum physics has been helpful to me. The idea that we kind of live in this infinite soup of possibility and we are just consciousness that snaps it into focus here and there. Another way of looking at it is questions and answers. The way I look at eternity now is like it's like this endless cycle of questions and answers. For every question, there's an answer. So wherever you're sitting in this sea of potentiality causes you to ask a new question. Well, what about this? Could it be like that? What about this? And that lines you up to receive a new answer, which puts you in a new paradigm where you ask a new question. So there's many different ways that I look at it. But for me, that's become fairly self-evident too, because I've seen things change on a dime. I've seen thinking about something and it's showing up right away. I've seen all kinds of crazy stuff that there's no other plausible explanation in my mind other than all things are possible. And if you just line up, you get there. So for me, that's been a big thing is the concept of infinite. And the more I think about infinite, the easier this whole thing is because, the second you start getting stressed out about something, oh, well, I have an eternity, so who cares? I got an eternity to figure this out, so we're good right now. So I like the bigger way of looking at it. It's easier for me to process.
Well, thank you for that concept. That's very beautiful and unique. I was like, oh, that's okay. It's connecting a little bit. Okay. Thank you so much for that. Where can we find you online or offline? Where can we find you?
Yeah, so I do have a website, which is raiseyourvibrationtoday.com. And I can also be found on Facebook, same name, Raise Your Vibration Today. YouTube, same name, Raise Your Vibration Today. And also on Instagram, although that handle is my name, which is Andrea.Schulman, Schulman. So those are the places I usually can be found these days.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. You're very, well, I enjoy our talk today. It's very fun.
I had a good time.
I know. Okay, guys, subscribe to my channel, like my video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.